Welcome to a Healing Peace podcast. My name is Kimir Baker. I am an overcomer. I am very passionate about helping others to achieve an abundant life fueled by spiritual principles and emotional balance. In this podcast series, we delve into spiritual self-care. Yes, we will explore exercising our minds and bodies, but more importantly, we will discuss strengthening our inner being, embracing God's love, and being filled by the fullness of God. As you take this journey with us, we want to inspire possessing your authentic selves and happiness. Hello, family. Can you believe it? We have hit summer and half of the year has gone by. How has your year been progressing? Sometimes it is good for us to do some reflective work to realize that sure enough, we have matured. More importantly, we truly are being transformed. Yeah! For those who follow me on social media or my wonderful newsletters, you noticed that I had the privilege to be interviewed by life coach Karina. In our interview, I shared about the power of God and how tending to our emotional health and healing leads us down a path of not only intimacy with God, but a transformed lifestyle. I will admit, I enjoy these moments where I can share about who we are as an organization. Yes, A Healing Peace is more than a podcast. We partner in bringing a message of Christ's love and deliverance, all the while providing tools to help us heal and embrace our emotional health. For those who have not seen or listened to the interview, well, now is your chance. Coming up after my wonderful introduction is the interview with Karina and myself. For our next segment, we will help you to reflect on your accomplishments this year by replaying our January episodes. This is a great time to be reminded of the tools and tips that help to get you to where you are today. Also, I want you to be aware, starting to have it out in your little brain a little bit. Save the time frame. I want to set a date, but it's not the specific date just yet. And that is, we about to have another incredible workshop this August, around August 25th on a Tuesday. You know how we do, love our Tuesdays. But the workshop is going to be incredible. We're going to focus on being our best cheerleader. If you participated in May's workshop, we will take a deeper dive into where we left off by establishing our support by how we interact with ourselves. Yes, ladies, it's about being our best cheerleaders, that best friend. Here we go. Okay, sometimes I get a little carried away. But before I forget, please tell your friends about us, write us a review, subscribe to our channel. You can always go to healingpeace.com for those infamous tools and tips. In the interim, listen. Here's a great interview. Again, I enjoy having the opportunity to share why we do what we do.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to War Cry Radio. Go Be Great. I am your host and your mindset coach, your life coach, Karina Calhoun. And I have on the show today a very special guest, and her name is Kimir Baker. Kimir Baker. I wanted to make sure I pronounced her name right because y'all know how I am. I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name because I don't want you to mispronounce mine. So, Kimir, how are you?
I'm doing well, and I thank you for the extra effort in my name pronunciation because growing up, I've been called everything but my name. And people even called me Kermit at one particular time because of the K. But I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show today.
You are very welcome. I am really excited to be talking to you. I know through a couple of mishaps on my end, and then just some confusion. Things were happening, and we've been trying to connect for a while now. And finally, we are connecting. I'm really eager and excited to dig into this conversation. And I think this is going to be a very powerful conversation,
Mhm.
a very much needed conversation. I have not gone into great detail to talk to you about it prior to the show. You all know, those of you that have been on the show and those of you that know a little bit about the background of how I do this, these are fireside chat. I don't speak to the guests before we come on because I want it to be an authentic
Mhm.
fire. I want it to be an authentic fireside chat. So we don't really know how it's going to go. We just talk. So, Kimir, tell us
Yeah.
about what you are doing. What do you have going on these days?
Well, I'll tell you, a passion of mine is with my nonprofit organization. It's called J Intelligence. There's more to the words, but to truncate it, because I got a little extra, we go by J Intel. And what we do is we try to empower women on their emotional healing and wellness journeys. And I know for myself, it was a passion of mine because of my own healing journey, just enduring a traumatic childhood and then coming to faith and wrestling with those wounds, but then trying to figure out how do I address these wounds in a healthy manner that just wasn't about praying, where it just wasn't about, oh, I read my Bible today, because reality was it didn't go away because I was doing those things. And so during my journey, there was a lot that I learned just from seeking additional support through therapists and counselors and life groups. And in that process, I was like, oh, these are incredible tools that really does complement my faith. And why not bridge them together so that I can, or all of us can have a more holistic healing journey? And it was kind of interesting because the day I talk about my bike a lot, because I do podcasts as well. On the podcast, I talk about me riding my bike. But as I was riding my bike today, one of the things that came to my mind was just how much God wants us to heal. And there are
Mhm.
so many scriptures in the Bible about him talking about come to him so we can heal. And I think so many times we overlook those scriptures because we're so used to that persona of God being very dogmatic. And so
Mhm.
we try to bring God back to a safe place. We try to allow women to know that, yeah, we got issues. And yes, God is safe. And yes, there's more things that we probably need as resources to get to that healing that we're seeking. So that's a little bit about what I do and our organization. And we do a lot in the organization because I'm one of those type A people. Yeah. So within the podcast, we have online workshops. We just had one last night talking about changing your thinking. And it was just encouraging seeing people have breakthroughs again with, man, God's with us. And again, we do have methods to shift this nagging, negative, just that's constantly trying to beat you down. And so we try to bring to light those realities and how do we work through it in a healthy way.
I love that. I love that, Kimir. And the one of the things that really sparks my interest about this conversation that we're getting ready to really dive into is the fact that you say we have the word, we have prayer, but even with those things, there was still a level of need there.
Mhm.
And I think people need to realize that it doesn't mean that you're weak. It
Right.
doesn't mean that you don't have faith. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you don't know God. And it doesn't mean that God doesn't know you. If you
Mhm.
go to a therapist or a counselor
Mhm.
or some other form, and I've told people this before, I believe my own belief is that a lot of times we need to have a pastor, a
Mhm.
coach, and a therapist
Mhm.
because they all serve a different purpose and
Mhm.
they all deal with you in a different way.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, some people do believe a pastor is a one size fits all,
Mhm.
and that is going to cut it. And that's not so. This is to
Mhm.
bring awareness.
Mhm.
to the fact that we have to get out of this mindset of if I go and seek help outside of the church, then something is wrong. So talk a little bit about that.
I definitely appreciate you bringing that up because I know for me, it took me a very long time to get to a place where I felt safe in my faith and safe getting additional tools. And the scripture that's come to mind right now is the passage that talks about renewing your mind.
Yes.
And we refer to it all the time. And in that, it's like if there's things that happen to our bodies physically where we require going to the doctor, we will do that.
Right.
And in terms of our mental and our emotional alertness, that's part of the whole body. And within that, there's elements that does require some kind of medication, if you want to call it such. And then when I think about in terms of pastors and other lay persons, sometimes they're not equipped to address those needs because they haven't had the opportunity to study things out. And they're coming from one perspective, and that perspective is usually the aftermath of the actions, which is stop in it, right? But with counseling and therapy, I think it does a little bit more because it gets to the root of why are you sinning? What
Right.
is prompting you to behave in this manner? Why are you going to these things of comfort that's destroying you? Let's pull back all those layers and deal with those issues. And that was something that I had to work through for myself was that, hey, it's okay for me to pull back those layers. And it's okay to go to individuals who've had training in dealing with those layers. Because again, I do not minimize the power of God because he's a healer and he does everything. And in that, it's like, as I'm learning these tools from these individuals, it's like, okay, well, I'm bringing these tools back to God and I'm asking him to make it long term. And that's why with our organization, it's not one or the other, it's both, because they're both equally important with healing and being able to be renewed and uplifted and to be able to be in that place longer than 5 minutes. And God wants us to be in that place longer than 5 minutes.
Absolutely. So I want to take a quick peek at your website, and you have a nonprofit, and it's called A Healing Peace.
Well,
P-E.
actually, that's the podcast. Yes. The A Healing Piece is the podcast. It's
Oh,
the
okay, that's
what
the
I
podcast.
call is the educational component because the name is so long with the nonprofit. And it's like, what's what? And if we had the podcast with the name of the nonprofit, you'll never find us.
Gotcha. Okay.
So a
Right.
healing piece was something that was a little bit more direct to the message that we're trying to put out where people can actually come find us. And so that's what a healing piece is. And that's where you see me, because in the nonprofit, you don't see my lovely face on the front page.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, but with the healing piece, one thing I scroll down and there's a sentence that really stands out to me, and it says, "We envision women's deliverance from emotional and interpersonal hurt to an intimate union with God." And when I read that, I think of when before I got saved, I remember not knowing that intimate relationship with God, and my entire life was based on the hurt that I
Mm-hmm.
had felt from a
Mm-hmm.
young child all the way up to the moment I got saved or was saved. And so, talk a little bit about that, really bringing in that gap between the woman and that intimate union with God, being released from that emotional and interpersonal hurt.
Yeah, and that's actually the benefit of dealing with that hurt, because normally what we do is that we hide from it, we stuff it, and we don't address it. And in those moments, it's actually creating a barrier between us and God, because sometimes, not all times, but sometimes what happens is as we continue in that state, we're enduring more and more life disappointments. And the more we endure it, the more it's God's fault. Or like, God, why weren't you here with me during this time? And I know you're all powerful. Didn't you see when X, Y, and Z was doing this to me? Or
Right.
it may be, God, I'm still hurting. Why am I still hurting? I know you see me. I know you hear me, but what's going on? And so what happens is that hurt really becomes a barrier because we project it onto God. And we make him so small that he's not able to attend those wounds. And then we carry it more, 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 and more, and more. And so when we actually take the time, even though it's painful, now I'm going to say healing is not easy because work is involved and it requires us to dig a little bit deeper into those areas of our hearts that we don't want to expose. But I'll tell you, on my personal healing journey and dealing with my therapist, like, we've dealt with the secrecies of my heart. And in those secrecies, they all brought me back to God because I needed to be comforted and I needed to hear a different voice than my hurt. And so when I'm able to get to that place where I'm like, okay, let me take off one layer. And then God, because he wants us to heal us, as we, I stated before with the scriptures. And as we're taking off those layers, he started doing some little bit more sweet things that we can pay attention to. Because sometimes the hurt is so strong, we can't see that he's working things out. And so when that hurt starts to pull away a little bit, we see him being more active. And in that activity, we're like, God, thank you. Like, you're right. Like, this could have been 10 times worse. I didn't see it because I was stuck in this one feeling at this moment. And then he started pulling that feeling out, and he shows you what's the truth behind that wound. And you're like, oh, God, oh no, you spared me from X, Y, and Z. Oh. And so it becomes a more deeper, intimate union with him because now you're telling him that it's okay, not only A, to be wounded, but B, that it's okay that you're going to heal those wounds.
I am sitting here listening to you and I am literally in awe of God because all I can think is, I want to work with this lady. That's all I can think, because I know that there are so many women that need your services, that need to hear what you have to say. And I am literally sitting here thinking, because I have had this idea, God has just really been talking to me over the last few months about creating a mastermind. And I am just thinking, I cannot let her out of my sight. I need her right there with me. This is why I love to have fireside chats, because you just never listen. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. So I'm still looking at your website, and under one of your tabs, I just want to tell the people just a few things that I see. And I want you to go to ahealingpeace.com. Those that are listening, ahealingpeace.com, PEACE. And this is her podcast, Kimir's podcast. And one of the tabs, it says tools and tips. And this is just great information. There's tools and tips for cultivating self-worth, tools and tips for preserving your value, tools and tips for healthy family dynamics, tools and tips for tackling fear and disappointment, tools and tips for dealing with isolation, tools and tips for biblical mediation, tools and tips for living an abundant life, tools and tips for an overcomer. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. And so there is amazing information here. I mean, I love it. I absolutely positively love it. Shifting your mindset. You have podcasts. It looks like you've got quite a few podcasts: spiritual self-care, positive self-talk, emotional health part 2, more than conquerors, winner mindset. This is information. This is a space that you're able to go to. Those of you that are listening, you're able to go to and get the real deal. Tell us more about this. We want to know. We just want to know everything.
Right. Well, to be honest, like, those who listen, you get the opportunity to hear more of my story. And this past 3 years, like, God has had me on another healing journey, because in my 30s, that was the first time where I finally had the courage to say, okay, I need help. And so I did my first round of therapy and really dealt with trauma that I endured as a child. And so I thought I was great. I was like, hey, I'm living life. We worked through all this, But then coming to my 40s, there were just things that just lingered. And so this past 3 years, God has deepened that healing journey. And in that deepening, what he's brought me to is understanding my identity in him. And understanding my self-worth in him, my value in him. as well as still healing from wounds that just kind of left a little extra. And so the podcast is really revealing that journey. So when I was trying to learn how to talk positive to myself, because at that time I really needed to know how to speak good things. And so God provided that opportunity he worked me through that journey so I can share it with other people. And so everything that you hear is legit because I have experienced it some kind of way. And I know that these were the things that helped me to get to that next level in my life. And so I said, let me share it. Everything that he gives me, I give back. And everything that I've learned, I give back. And then again, the hopes of is just as much as it was impactful for me, that it will be impactful for you. And it may speed up your healing process because you're like, okay, oh, she told me about this. Now I know what's going on. And so it brings that sense of commonality and that sense of, oh, it's okay for me to be human. And then we just continue to move forward. And I have people on the show and they're sharing their insights. And it's a really great, refreshing time. And I've enjoyed the podcast. And it's been a lot of work with the podcast, but it's definitely a labor of love.
Absolutely. It is work. It is definitely work. I don't know who thinks it's easy and that they see the glitz and glam, but it is work. So I would like for you, Kimira, to tell us how we can get in touch with you.
For sure. Hey, listen to the podcast, or you can always on ahealingpeace.com. There's a contact us. I'm always there. We have our social media profiles. And in our social media with Facebook and Instagram, we always welcome feedback. So feel free to talk. Send me a direct message. I will definitely respond because it definitely excites me when I know that there's little nuggets that's helping another person. So my Instagram handler and Facebook handler is A Healing Peace.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Kimira, thank you so very much for joining us on the show today. I think this was an amazing conversation. And I am going to ask that you do come back and join us at some point to talk more about this because I believe this is a very needed conversation. We need to have this conversation in communities, more specifically in the Black communities, because that's where it seems to be taboo to have a therapist or a counselor of some type. And so I really want to be able to push this out there so that we have more awareness on really having mental health healing, really healing. I believe that, and you touched on this a little bit, that our minds are to be renewed, but we'll go to the doctor for something that's in our body physically that needs a doctor, but not our mind. And so we really need to begin to push this and change the narrative. So Kimira, thank you so very much.